My name is Elena Markovich. I'm 30 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I was going to marry a man who understood what loyalty meant. I was wrong. My parents came to this country in 1991 with two suitcases, no English, and me wrapped in a handmade blanket my grandmother had sewn before they fled. I was 3 years old then, too young to understand borders, loss, or the way fear can follow a family into a new country. That blanket still sits folded on my parents' couch, worn thin at the edges, like a quiet witness to everything they survived before I was old enough to remember. Back home, my father had been an engineer. Here, that meant almost nothing. His degree didn't translate, his accent made people impatient, and his name seemed to close doors before he even reached the handle. So he took whatever work would take him. First, a meat packing plant where the cold sank into his bones. Later, hotel maintenance, where he spent years fixing other people's comfort while his own knees slowly gave out. My mother cleaned houses, then offices, then hospital rooms on the night shift so she could still be home when I got off the school bus. She would sleep in pieces, cook in between jobs, and still ask me about homework like she had all the time in the world. They never complained. Not about the cold, not about the people who spoke slowly and loudly at them, as if volume could replace respect. Not about exhaustion, even after exhaustion became the shape of their lives. They just worked. Every extra dollar went into rent or into me. When I got a partial scholarship to a state university, my parents somehow covered the rest. I still don't know how. Two people making barely enough to breathe sent their daughter through college without debt, and they did it so quietly that I didn't understand the size of the sacrifice until I was old enough to look back and feel ashamed of how normal I thought it was. My father once admitted he wore the same work boots for 3 years because my sophomore housing deposit came first. The soles were splitting. One side had duct tape wrapped around it. When he told me, I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. If I had let the truth of it reach me all at once, I would have cried in front of him. And my father hates making me sad more than he hates bad shoes. I became a software engineer. I worked hard, failed a few times, started over, moved up, and eventually became a senior developer making good money. Not billionaire tech money, but enough. Enough that the girl who once counted grocery coupons became the woman who could buy dinner without checking her account first. From my first real paycheck, I started sending my parents money. At first, it was $800 a month. Later, $1,500. Automatic transfer, no missed months, no discussion. They never asked for it. My father actually sent it back the first few times, so I rerouted it to my mother's account because I knew she would use it quietly for things he was too proud to admit they needed. Dental work, a new water heater, property taxes, medication, repairs that had been waiting because waiting was cheaper than fixing. They're in their 60s now. Dad retired after his knees finally refused to keep pretending. Mom still works part-time, mostly because she doesn't know how to stop. Their house is paid off, their savings are thin, and Social Security covers the basics. My money covers the rest. And I have never regretted it. Then there was Adrian. If you had met him during our first year together, you would have liked him. Everyone did. He was polished without seeming fake, funny without trying too hard, and attentive in the way that makes you feel chosen. He remembered my coffee order, my favorite author, the scar near my elbow from a bike accident when I was 12. He worked in pharmaceutical sales, made good money, and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had never worried about the floor dropping out from under him. His family was comfortably upper middle class. His parents paid for college, helped with his first condo, covered his first car. That wasn't a crime. It wasn't even a flaw. It was just a difference, and at first I thought difference could be bridged by love. I told him about the monthly transfer early in the relationship, maybe our fourth date. I believe money becomes part of the truth once a relationship starts getting serious. Adrian listened, smiled, and said, "That's actually really sweet." Sweet. I remember that word now because of how small it feels in hindsight. Sweet, like a charming habit. Sweet, like something temporary. Sweet, like a child sharing crayons. 2.5 years later, we got engaged. 3 months into planning the wedding, we started talking seriously about merged finances, housing, kids, retirement, wedding costs, the future people build when they believe they're walking in the same direction. I showed him my budget spreadsheet because I'm exactly the kind of woman who keeps one. He leaned over my laptop, scanned the numbers, and tapped one line. Monthly family support, $1,500. So this just continues forever? He asked. Yes. Even after we're married? Especially after we're married. If my income keeps growing, I'll probably increase it. His face barely changed, but something in his eyes pulled back. That's $18,000 a year. I know. That could go toward a vacation. It also goes toward property taxes and prescriptions. We'll have kids eventually. We'll plan for that. A house? Yes. Retirement? Yes, Adrian, all of it. He nodded like the conversation was over, but over the next few weeks it came back in smaller, sharper shapes. Must be nice having someone send you money every month. My parents handled retirement on their own. Do they really need that much? Seems like a lot for two people. Each comment was small enough to dismiss, and that's how I made my mistake. I kept telling myself he didn't understand yet. I thought context would soften him. Love can make even smart women negotiate with obvious signs, because admitting the truth too early feels like grieving before the funeral. 3 weeks later, we were reviewing catering quotes. 140 guests, $87 per person. Numbers so absurd they made marriage feel less like romance and more like a corporate merger. Adrian closed the binder and said, I think you need to reduce what you send your parents. I looked up. Reduce? Or stop? I laughed because I thought he couldn't be serious. His face told me he was. Why? Because we're building a future. We are. That money should go toward us. My finances already support us. We're not struggling. He leaned back, crossed his arms, and said the sentence that changed everything. They should have saved better. The room didn't explode. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Something inside me simply went quiet in a way that scared me. My parents were refugees, I said. That doesn't change math. I stared at him while he continued, calm as a man explaining interest rates. Parents are supposed to provide for their kids. Lots of people struggle. That doesn't mean adult children bankroll them forever. I set the catering folder down carefully. Sometimes anger doesn't make you loud. Sometimes it makes you precise. I'll consider it, I said. He relaxed, and that told me he had no idea what had just happened. I wasn't considering cutting off my parents. I was considering whether I could marry a man who looked at the people who broke themselves open to give me a future and saw poor planning. That night, I lay beside him, listening to the air conditioner hum, while replaying every conversation we had ever had, every joke, every small comment, every time I explained my family's history and watched him nod. I wondered if he had ever respected my parents, or if he had simply tolerated my loyalty because he assumed marriage would redirect it toward him. At some point, after 2 a.m, he rolled over and draped an arm across my waist. It was a familiar gesture, once comforting. That night, it felt like a hand resting on a door I had already locked from the inside. By morning, I knew what I needed to do. I called my financial advisor before Adrian even left for work. Stephen was practical, calm, and allergic to drama, which was exactly why I trusted him. I told him I wanted to increase the support to $2,000 a month and create a protected structure around it so the payments wouldn't vanish if I hit a rough patch. He explained the limits clearly. It wouldn't be magic, and it wouldn't last forever without continued funding. But with a dedicated account and written instructions, it could become stable, automatic, and hard to interfere with. Is this emotional? He asked. Yes. Is it irrational? No. He paused, then said, Those are not the same thing. By that afternoon, I had moved part of my personal savings, not shared money, not wedding money, mine, into the dedicated account. Enough to keep the transfers stable, even if something went wrong with my job. I didn't do it to punish Adrian. I did it because his question had revealed how fragile an unwritten promise can look to someone who wants to erase it. That evening, I called my parents and told them the monthly support was increasing. My father said no before I finished the sentence. Dad? No. Mama, help me. She agrees with me, he said, offended that I had tried to recruit her. For 11 minutes, he argued. I needed my own future. I needed savings. I might have children one day. I told him I had savings, a future, and the ability to decide what I could afford. Eventually, his voice softened, and he said, You are a good daughter. That almost broke me, because parents like mine rarely hand you love directly. They wrap it in warnings, food, repairs, and reminders to wear a coat. You deserve more than I can repay, I said. My mother sniffled in the background, and I ended the call before I started crying too. Then I texted Adrian, Can you come over Saturday? Need to talk. He replied 20 minutes later. Sure, everything okay? I stared at those words longer than I should have. There is something almost cruel about being asked if everything is okay by the person who made it impossible for things to stay that way. Saturday arrived bright and ordinary. People were walking dogs, coffee shops were full, the world continuing with offensive calm while my life prepared to split open. Adrian showed up around 2, shopping bags in one hand, sunglasses pushed into his hair. He kissed my cheek and smiled like nothing had changed. I thought about what we discussed, I said. He perked up. I saw it immediately. The tiny flash of satisfaction, the assumption that maturity meant agreement. Sit down, I told him. He sat at the kitchen table. I stayed standing, not for drama, but because some conversations become negotiable the moment you make yourself too comfortable. I'm not reducing support to my parents, I said. I increased it. It's $2,000 a month now, structured through a dedicated account, so it continues reliably. It's done. His face moved through confusion, disbelief, and anger so quickly I could almost track each stage. You increased it after I specifically asked you to stop? You asked me to consider it. I did. That's $24,000 a year. Yes. Elena, that's a down payment. That's childcare. That's our future. It's also my income, my parents, and a commitment I made before this relationship existed. So my opinion means nothing? Your opinion was heard. My decision is made. He stood and started pacing, hands in his hair. You're choosing them over us. I looked at him, and what hurt most was realizing he believed it. He truly saw my loyalty to my parents as competition, not as part of the woman he claimed to love. I'm choosing to honor the people who built my life, I said. If that feels like a threat to you, then we have a bigger problem than money. His face hardened. I can't believe this. There's one more thing, I said. He stopped moving. I think we should end the engagement. For a moment, he simply stared at me. Then he laughed once, short and ugly. That's ridiculous. It isn't. You're ending 2.5 years over a budgeting disagreement? No, I'm ending it because I found out the man I was about to marry believes my parents' suffering was a financial planning error. That's unfair. It's exact. His voice dropped into something calmer, softer, more dangerous. Baby, don't do this emotionally. There are few things more insulting than being told not to be emotional by the person who detonated your trust and then disliked the sound it made. This isn't emotion, I said. This is judgment. You're overreacting. No. Wedding deposits are paid. Families are involved. You can't just blow everything up because I asked a practical question. You didn't ask a practical question. You told me my parents should have saved better after surviving displacement, language barriers, poverty, and decades of physical labor. That wasn't just about money, Adrian. It told me exactly how you see people like my parents. Then he said it. Stop acting insane. The word landed cleanly. Insane. Not hurt, not angry, not disappointed. Insane. Some insults don't just hurt you in the moment. They reveal what someone was willing to believe about you the second you became inconvenient. I removed my ring slowly and placed it on the table between us. I'm done. For the first time since he arrived, Adrian looked afraid. Not heartbroken, not yet. Afraid. Like a man who had pushed a door expecting it to swing open and heard the lock click instead. He tried to recover. He told me not to make something permanent because I was angry. He said he cared about my parents, that he had worded things badly, that we had built a life together. I told him we had planned one, and planning is not the same as building. When softness failed, he tried guilt. Do your parents even know? Would they want you ending your engagement over them? My parents would hate being the reason, I said, which is why they aren't the reason. You are. He picked up the ring, turned it between his fingers, and set it back down. You'll regret this. Maybe he expected me to flinch. I didn't. I might regret loving the wrong person too long, I said, but not this. He left without slamming the door, and somehow the quiet felt worse. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after he was gone, surrounded by the kind of silence that makes memories louder. Then I sat down and cried harder than I expected. Not because I wanted him back, because grief is never as clean as self-respect makes it look from the outside. You mourn the person, yes, but you also mourn the imagined life, the version of yourself who thought she had chosen well, the future that disappeared before it ever had the chance to disappoint you slowly. Around 9 that night, Adrian's mother called. I let it ring. She called again. Then came a text. Please call us. This is ridiculous. Us. Not Adrian. Us. That told me the breakup was about to stop being private. The next morning, I listened to her voicemail. Elena, I don't know what kind of impulsive game you're playing, but Adrian is devastated. Wedding deposits have been paid. Families are involved. Adults don't behave this way. Adults. People love that word when what they really mean is comply quietly. I deleted the voicemail and checked the wedding account. A little over $9,000 sat there, contributed equally by both of us. Venue deposit, florist, photographer. I texted Adrian that he could keep the full amount to recover deposits. I wasn't interested in fighting over wedding money for a wedding that no longer existed. He didn't respond. The next morning, he emailed my work address. Subject line, we need to discuss financial obligations. Inside was an itemized list of dinners, trips, gifts, concert tickets, and a birthday weekend he had chosen to pay for. At the bottom, $6,340. He wanted reimbursement for dating me. I read it twice, waiting for the part that made it less absurd. There wasn't one. I forwarded it to my personal email, closed the message, and went back to work. If adulthood teaches you anything, it is that emotional nonsense rarely pauses your calendar. But the money wasn't what disturbed me most. It was how quickly affection became an invoice once access was revoked. Healthy love doesn't keep hidden receipts for the day it needs leverage. On Tuesday, my college friend Marcus called. "Hey," he said awkwardly. "Is everything okay with you?" My stomach tightened. "Why?" "Adrian called. He asked if you'd been acting unstable." There it was. Not "we disagreed." Not "she ended things because of values." Unstable. Later that day, a coworker stopped by my desk holding coffee like a shield. Adrian had found her through LinkedIn or an old company event post and asked if I seemed okay lately. She hadn't answered, but the damage was already done. My office no longer felt separate from the mess. He had dragged his narrative into a place where I had earned my credibility line by line, year by year. By Wednesday, his mother called again, and this time I answered. "You've devastated my son," she said. "I ended an engagement. You blindsided him." No, he ignored what I was saying until consequences arrived. "He asked you to be financially responsible. He asked me to abandon my parents." "Oh, please, your parents are adults." "Yes, adults who lost everything and rebuilt from nothing." Everyone has a sad story, Elena. That was the moment the call ended for me. Not technically, but emotionally. She said it like my parents' lives were a dramatic prop I kept pulling out to win arguments. "I think this conversation is over," I said. "You're selfish." I hung up and blocked her. For one day, things were quiet. I let myself hope the worst had passed. Then, Thursday night, my father called. My father never calls at night. He goes to bed early, an old habit from decades of early shifts. The moment I saw his name, my body knew before my mind did. "Dad?" His voice sounded wrong, tight, careful. "Your mother got a call today." My hand closed around the phone. "From who?" "A man. He said he was Adrian." I sat down before my knees could fail me. "What did he say?" My father hated repeating it. I could hear that in the way each word came slower than the last. "He said you were hiding debt. He said the money you send us is money you cannot afford. He told your mother we were selfish for taking it." For a second, I couldn't speak. Not because of what he had done to me, because I pictured my mother hearing that. My mother, who still apologizes when strangers bump into her. My mother, who buys generic cereal and calls it perfectly fine. My mother, who spent most of her life treating her own needs like luxuries. "Dad, none of that is true," I said. "I have no debt. My finances are fine. The money is affordable." He was quiet for a while. Then he asked, "Why did you really end the engagement?" I hadn't told them the truth. I had said it didn't work out because I didn't want them to feel guilty. But sometimes what we call protection is really just our own fear of making people we love sad. So I told him, "Because he asked me to stop sending you money. He said you should have saved better." The silence that followed felt heavy enough to change the room. "He said this about us?" "Yes." "And you ended things?" "Yes." Another pause, then softly, painfully, he said, "You should not have done that for us." "I didn't do it for you," I said. "I did it because I cannot marry someone who thinks that way." My father cleared his throat, that tiny sound men make when emotion gets too close. "Come Sunday," he said, "your mother is making stew." That was my father's way of opening his arms. No speeches, no dramatic declarations, just dinner. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not because I wanted revenge, but because peace sometimes needs paperwork. I explained everything. The email to my work address, the financial demands, the calls to friends, the coworker contact, the false statements to my parents. The attorney was practical. He said heartbreak wasn't actionable, but harassment could be, especially when false statements were being made to family and professional contacts. He drafted a cease and desist letter telling Adrian to stop contacting me, my family, my coworkers, or my friends. Clear facts, no emotional language, no threats beyond the legal ones. Then I sent Adrian one final email. The full wedding fund offer would stand for 30 days. His list of relationship expenses had no legal basis, and I wouldn't be paying it. A legal notice had been sent regarding further contact. I wished him well because restraint mattered to me, not because he deserved tenderness, but because I deserved not to become someone I wouldn't recognize. Saturday morning, his father emailed me. Subject line, "I'm sorry." He said Adrian had shown him the letter. He hadn't known Adrian had contacted my parents, and he hadn't known his wife had escalated things either. Then he wrote, "For what it's worth, I always respected your commitment to your family. Not many people your age understand loyalty that way." I read that sentence more than once. Validation from unexpected places has a strange weight. I replied politely and left it there. His mother, naturally, was not done. On Sunday morning, a message came from an unfamiliar number. Lawyers won't protect you from karma. Then another. What goes around comes around for women who destroy good men. I screenshot both, forwarded them to my attorney, and drove to my parents' house. Their house has never looked impressive. No big driveway, no designer landscaping, no polished entry staged for guests. Just a modest little home in a quiet neighborhood, every inch of it earned the hard way. Yet stepping inside made my body loosen in a way no expensive place ever had. The smell reached me first. Lamb, root vegetables, warm spices, my mother's stew. That smell had followed me through childhood fevers, exam stress, college visits, job rejections, and every version of heartbreak I had survived before this one. Some scents don't just remind you of home. They remind you that you existed before the pain. Take your shoes off, my mother called before she even saw me. I smiled. Some rules survive every crisis. She hugged me tightly and touched my face. You look tired. Good to see you too. You are thinner. I'm not. Still. My father muted the television when I walked in and said, "Sit." That was love in his language. Short, practical, impossible to misunderstand. We ate without mentioning Adrian for a while, and I was grateful. Not every wound needs immediate discussion. Some need stew, familiar chairs, and people who don't ask you to explain your pain before they believe it. At one point, my mother reached across the table and put her hand over mine. You are a good daughter. I almost cried into my bowl. Immigrant children grow up with strange emotional math. Everything your parents sacrificed becomes both motivation and guilt. You spend your life trying to become proof their suffering meant something, then trying to repay a debt they never admit exists. You don't have to say that, I whispered. Yes, she said, I do. At the end of dinner, my father cleared his throat. The new amount is too much. Dad, at least reduce later. No. Elena, no. He sighed like a man obligated to resist even after losing. Then let me fix your brakes. They were squeaking last time. I laughed for real. The first laugh in weeks that didn't feel defensive. Deal. That was our rhythm. I sent money. He returned love through labor. Last year, he reorganized my garage. The year before, he built shelves I never asked for. Once he replaced a faucet because, according to him, the pressure was annoying. Men like my father cannot accept generosity without finding a way to give something back. Pride survives poverty in strange forms. When I left, my mother packed leftovers into containers despite my protests because maternal food smuggling is apparently universal. Driving home, I still felt sad, but steadier. Heartbreak isolates you. Family reminds you that isolation is often a lie your pain tells convincingly. My apartment was quiet when I walked in. No Adrian's shoes by the door, no cologne in the bathroom, no wedding binder on the counter, just space, sharper and cleaner than before. I put the food in the fridge, sat on the couch, and finally let myself think honestly. Adrian hadn't been a villain from day one. That would make the story easier, and real life rarely gives you that mercy. He had made me laugh. He had remembered small things. He had brought coffee on hard mornings and celebrated my promotions. Those moments were real. But so was what happened. That is the hardest part of growing up, realizing that good memories are not evidence of good values. A person can love you in some ways and still be wrong for your life in the ways that matter most. Chemistry can start a relationship, but worldview is what decides whether it survives pressure. I kept returning to the sentence that ended us. They should have saved better. What haunted me wasn't only the cruelty, it was how easily he said it. No hesitation, no conflict, no awareness that he had just reduced decades of survival to a budgeting failure. Stress doesn't usually create beliefs like that. It just makes people stop hiding them. Weeks passed. The cease and desist worked. No more calls, no more texts, no surprise contact through friends or coworkers. The wedding fund was resolved through attorneys. Adrian accepted the full amount quietly. No dramatic final fight, no retroactive invoice, just paperwork, which felt appropriate. Some relationships end in one final conversation. Ours ended in paperwork. On the first of the month, the $2,000 transfer went through exactly on schedule. A few days later, my mother texted me a photo. My father stood in this hallway wearing brand new boots. Good ones. Waterproof, insulated, proper support, no duct tape, no stubborn survival engineering, just new boots on a man who had spent too much of his life pretending old things could last longer than they should. I stared at that photo for a long time and cried. Because money is not always about money. Sometimes it is dignity, relief, comfort. Sometimes It is making sure the people who spent decades saying, "I'm fine," finally get to stop performing toughness for the world. That was what Adrian never understood. He thought I was sending money. I was sending peace. I set the photo as my phone background. Not forever, probably, but for now. And if losing that relationship taught me anything, it is this. If loving someone means betraying the people and values that shaped you, something is already broken. It is negotiation dressed as devotion. Sometimes the person you lose is not the tragedy. Sometimes the real tragedy would have been marrying them.